Welcome everyone to the new wave of the employee experience, an event hosted by the Agile 11 in collaboration with Wiploy, Law Square, G2 Innovation and CircleWin. And we have our beautiful moderator, Mikey Ellis, here from the Good Empire. The Agile 11 has been hosting the 11 Nights, our series of events since last year, and our intention is to make work better for everyone. This is our purpose as an organization. And also what we wanted is to connect with people. We wanted to share our knowledge and add value to the community. And we wanted to have some fun as well. So those events are normally hosted at 6 p.m. face-to-face. So this is the first time we're doing this virtually due to the current circumstances that we need to acknowledge. But I think we can still have fun. I think we can still connect. And I think we can still share knowledge and add value to all of you. So I'll stop talking now and I'll pass on to our moderator, Mikey Ellis.
Thank you, Bia. Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I am currently, the Boon Wurrung and the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, their elders past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge the traditional owners of the place in which you are right now, wherever you are joining us from. Maybe you can chuck in the chat or the Q&A there where you are joining us from. I'd love to see where you are. I'd like to acknowledge the current situation that we're in also. The fact is, we're talking about employee experiences, the employee experience, and this is in the context of unprecedented job losses, businesses are closing, there's extreme uncertainty at the moment. And I just want to be respectful of that. We'll do our best to make this content relevant. But knowing that many of you are facing significant challenges, and it is a uncertain time for us all. But I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be here with us tonight, and to the Agile 11 and everyone who's on the panel. I'll introduce them in just a moment for making this happen. I'd like to share our intention tonight, which is to provide some tips and some tools, some resources, some perspective and some respectful discussion around the topic of employee experience. And we really want to do that to support you in supporting your team, your people, and in taking care of yourself as well. Just some rules of engagement for us tonight, to be kind, to be respectful of each other's circumstances, and those circumstances are unknown for so many of us. Some respectful conversation. There will be glitches, and I ask you to bear with us. Before I introduce the panel, I'd like for each of the panelists to take themselves off mute, and I've created a little webinar oath for us. And what I'm going to get you to do is just raise your hand and repeat after me, if you will. I swear.
I swear.
I swear.
I swear.
More often than not.
More often.
More often than not.
To be kind and respectful of each other.
To be kind.
Be kind and respectful of each other.
To engage in respectful conversation.
To engage in respectful conversation.
To forgive our hosts of any technical glitches.
To forgive
our hosts of any technical glitches.
And to not be switching screens to Married at First Sight.
Not be
And not be switching screens to Married at First Sight.
So help me, Brene Brown.
So help me,
Brene Brown.
I think Brene Brown might just be the closest thing we have to God at this time. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then what we're going to do after that, I'm going to direct some questions to them. That'll go for the next 45 minutes or so. During this time, I encourage you to pop some questions in the Q&A box, and they'll be managed, and we'll get to those. We'll get to those after the questions, but we're really happy to answer some questions as we go. We're pretty flexible with how we're going to run this. Very conscious of the fact that it's really boring just sitting at home and listening to 6 of us talk. We want to make it as interactive as possible, and we'll encourage you to ask questions, and we'll get to those throughout the evening. By way of introduction, my name is Mikey Ellis. I work with The Good Empire. We're a small team of big-hearted humans, and we help companies find purpose, and we build great cultures and help people in those organisations to do work that matters in the world. I'm going to introduce Hugo Robinson. He's head of sales at WePloy. Give us a wave, Hugo. WePloy is an on-demand staffing platform for short or long-term temporary or contract hiring. Bia, you've met earlier on. She's the head of growth and enterprise agile coach at the Agile 11, our host for this evening. Andrew Jones, currently being chased by a budgerigar. He's the co-founder of G2 Innovation, who transform teams and organizations through innovative ways of working. Kate Pollard, you give us a wave, Kate. Kate's the co-founder of Circle In, and is an advocate for driving gender equality and supporting women through parental leave. And last but not least is Catherine Brooks, Associate Director at Law Squared. Law Squared have disrupted the traditional law firm model and are doing great work to support entrepreneurs in high growth business. What I might do is just get you each just to say a few words, maybe a minute or two on the work you're doing now and how the employee experience has changed for you. And we'll start with you, Hugo.
Cool. Hey, everyone. Great to be here. So I think it's really interesting that we're having this event at this time. So firstly, I think it's important for us to be less employee and more human experience at the moment. As leaders, it's important to be extra compassionate and channeling some Brene Brown, even a bit vulnerable, given the current climate out there. I think the reality of this situation is that nobody's really been through this before. The situation's challenging, and we have to be cognizant of that. And really, the way that we've always known work to be and human interaction to be has fundamentally changed as well. So I think for us, you know, we're seeing some crazy uncertainty. We're seeing huge amounts of variability and the redundancies and volatility across the market. And for us as being a small business, it's incredibly important for us to be agile and move quickly, and also assure people that their job security is okay. And I think in part we are a fully remote team now, which I'm sure a lot of the attendees here are as well. So I think communication is especially important and is becoming pivotal to understanding what our people are feeling and going through daily. So I think one of the ways that we're staying connected is through platforms like Zoom, which a lot of people are leveraging already, and I'm sure their sales team are incredibly busy at the moment. But it's important to be curious about, or our people are curious about what the execs are doing as well, and what the people above us are thinking and how they're reacting to the situation. So just increasing that communication channel between the top and bottom is super critical right now.
Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna hand over to Bia just to introduce a little bit of the work that you do at the moment too, at the Agile 11, and encourage each of the panelists tonight to really think about what it is that you're doing and you're experiencing and that you're witnessing in the work you're doing with the companies that you're working with, and that you can share with our audience to provide some really pertinent and relevant insights to some of the challenges that they might be facing. But Bia, this is the work that you do at the Agile 11. Tell us a little bit about how the employee experience is changing and what that's like for you and your team.
Yeah, so at the Agile 11, we make work better for everyone. So we help teams of all shapes and sizes in Australia and also overseas. Most of the work we do can be remote and can be done remotely, and some organizations and some clients that we've been consulting and coaching right now, of course, we are doing everything 100% remotely. The change for us is quite a silver lining, and even though it's quite a challenging moment, for us there is the silver lining there to really rethink what actually work is and what the meaning of work is. So that employee experience for us right now is paramount, and we are doing everything we can in our power with webinars and educating and supporting the community in any way we can to say, okay, there is a better way, and maybe we'll take this opportunity to work remotely to provide an even better employee experience, and trying to coach those leaders and leadership teams to rethink about, unlearn what work means. So work, is not a location, and work is not 9 to 5. So this new wave of the employee experience, especially now, is critical for us, and it's such a fantastic opportunity for us to, come out stronger after all this crisis.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing more about some tips and tools and some resources that you've been using. We can share some of those later on. So thank you, Bea. Andrew, the work you do at G2 Innovation is all about supporting teams through innovative ways of working. I can't imagine there's a time where you've had to put what you do into practice as urgently as you are now. So tell us a little bit about your experience over the last few weeks.
Yeah, Mikey, absolutely spot on. So we work with teams and organizations to create creative, curious and innovative teams and individuals that drive innovation autonomously. And what's really interesting is prior to this, teams and the companies we work with would tell us how important innovation is to their organization, but the urgency was always lacking. Innovation was always that thing that we got to when we had time and we had the space. Well, now innovation is important and urgent. Innovation is all about dealing with change and disruption, possibly even driving that change and disruption and seeing opportunities in everything we do. And while this is troubling times and very desperate times for some, there are still opportunities, and creating new ways of working and seeing the value that we can create for others by doing that is really important. And obviously the employee experience has always been an area that had a demand for innovation and looking at things differently to create a better experience. Now we're being forced to look at it at speed. So a lot of the work we're doing is helping our clients and companies we work with to really get their heads around it. People innovate, not organizations. So how can we support our people to work through this, look for solutions, keep a level head, fall in love with the problem, and really understand it to deliver the best solution that creates long-lasting value for us all.
That's amazing. Thank you. I think upon just hearing some of this, some of your context and some of your experience so far, when we first started looking at this event, it was a number of months ago, and nobody could have anticipated or predicted we'd be having this conversation in this context. But I can't think of too many people who would be better suited to provide some experience and some insight in navigating this change as we have on the panel now. And Kate, I'll go to you next. You've been working to drive changes and build awareness around gender equality and supporting women through parental leave. I imagine that the experience that a lot of parents are having at home now and trying to navigate and manage that the balance of working from home while having kids at home is something that's very new for most people, but it's something that you've been exploring for quite some time. You've got a head start on this.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, my background is originally set up Circle In after having 2 kids myself, and really struggling with the reality of feeling like career and being a parent were mutually exclusive. So Jodie Geddes and myself, we set up Circle In a few years ago. So Circle In is an online platform for working parents that basically helps them stay engaged and feel connected through all stages of parenthood. So if you're thinking about having a baby or going on leave and then returning to work, but then all the stages that come after that as a working parent. So even if you've got teenage kids. So our purpose is really about how do we make a better world for working parents. And the reality is that the whole, piece around remote working, it's basically become mainstream in the last 2 weeks. So, the challenges that people are facing are just unprecedented. It was kind of ironic. We've done some research recently, and one of the key things that, people wanted to do more of as working parents was to work, have more flexibility about how they work. I just don't think that they thought their kids would be at home with them at the same time. So, we're seeing a real change in how people are working. And, we're really seeing it on a few different levels. Not only we've got a lot of HR practitioners who are, struggling to kind of meet up with the demands of, a fully remote working workforce, and how do they cope with that change? How do they support people? You've also got managers who haven't managed people remotely before at this, on this scale. So, how do they keep their people engaged? How do they, motivate them? How do they make sure that people are still working effectively? And this is really, really difficult when you're a parent and potentially you have two parents at home, both working remotely and trying to be productive, and kids in the background. So it's a very difficult situation. And then you've got the individuals who are at home and trying to do the best they can, but, basically the world's being turned upside down. So, parents are feeling a lot more, stressed, and, it's really escalated in the last little while. So, there's a lot of challenges out there as people adjust to this, new way of working. So yeah, it's a lot of change happening, and it's really interesting seeing how this is going to impact parents. I really feel like parents are probably one of the biggest groups that are going to be impacted, in terms of working like this, and the new working experience has really dramatically changed.
Absolutely. And it's not just the context in which we're working. There are circumstances that are compounding. There's the way in which we're working. There's the impact that the current situation is having on the economy and on people's businesses and livelihoods, as well as the fact that parents have got kids at home. It's massive. One of the things that I think is a massive challenge for businesses, HR leaders, Catherine, is how to manage the responsibilities of looking after or caring for, taking responsibility for your people while they're working from home. I know that when we looked into remote working or people working from home, when I was working in another company, obviously there was a lot of regulations necessary to comply with regards to your workstation. But here I am sitting on my couch with my laptop propped up on a box. From a legal perspective, this must be something that you're really having to scramble to understand and support people with when it comes to how they're supporting their teams.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting time. Yes, I've been an employment lawyer for just over 12 years now. I always said that I would quit law after 10, but it's a lot of fun. And at this time, it's obviously involves a lot of innovation and empathy. And we've been working particularly for the last fortnight at Law Squared just to help a lot of our clients pivot, restructure, look at really innovative ways that they can work with their workforce to try and keep the economy going, because, I think as Scott Morrison said yesterday, we're fighting a health battle, but also an economic one, and we want to make sure that there's something for people to return to if they can't be working right now. So yeah, the interesting part for me is that those organisations that were quite ahead of the game, that had work from home policies and had a lot of these documents in place, they're actually just not fit for purpose given the current environment. So they're really relying on the fact that they've hired good people, and they're trying to say to people, go home and we have to trust you to work. And then they're basically calling me and saying, what do we need to rejig so that we can make sure everything's safe? And, it is a bit of a moving feast, because we had just an announcement last night from the Prime Minister that actually now changes a whole lot of the documents or the policies and procedures that we did put in place. So it's just something that we have to be constantly on top of, but also really trusting in our people to do the right thing. And as leaders, I think now it's a really important time to show bravery, to show courage, and to just really go hard. I've seen a lot of memes on the internet around now's the time for self-reflection and we can go out and read a book and blah, blah, blah. And I think I get where that sentiment comes from. I think it comes from a really privileged position, and it makes me furious because there's a lot of people that aren't in that position to be able to do that. And I think that we as leaders actually really need to be going hard right now to make sure that we're bringing everything that we've got to work, everything that we've got to the workplace, and being there for our team. So yeah, really interesting times, and it's been pretty hard as an employment lawyer, but feeling very privileged to have a job and really excited to be here tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much. I might just stick with you and this topic just for a moment, because it's something that I think it's probably not as urgent a priority when it comes to setting yourself up for the day or for the week. I think the first thing people do is manage the ways in which they're going to communicate, but the rules and regulations. Are they being made up as we go, or you said there's a lot of policy that even for those that were really well prepared are now redundant. What is somebody who's responsible for a large team now who's working from home? What do they do in order to make sure that they're providing the kind of support that keeps their team safe, both physically, emotionally, as they work from home with all of these compounding factors?
Yeah, well, I think I'll give you two examples that I've dealt with today, because I think that really sheds a light on it. So the first one was in relation to an employer that had about 2,000 staff members. They had a very strict working from home policy that when you do work from home, you actually can't do that with children present. And obviously there's an element of work health and safety, but also just an element of productivity. But at the moment, we've got unprecedented situation where people have to be at home with their children. So obviously they've had to totally spin that and just look at really innovative ways that they can work with the parents to make sure that they can still do the work that is required. And obviously the parents really want to keep getting paid. So we've looked at really innovative discussions around monitoring our workforce in a way that we can be really upfront. So previously, I would never tell my employer my husband's hours, but now saying, look, we've worked out an arrangement where he's going to work 6 till 1 and then we're going to have lunch together, and then I'm going to be on from 2 till 9 or whatever it is. So that's a really interesting concept, I think, that's been flipped on its head, and Kate will obviously have a lot more to talk on that front. I, for one, personally, just a bit of self-disclosure, hate working from home, love having a place away from my children, and the experience for me today has just proven that it is really tough, but we need to be working out ways that we can do it. And the second really interesting example I had today, I look after a lot of not-for-profit clients, and one of our clients that we've just got an EBA approved for, they work in the domestic violence space. Now, they're providing services to people that are experiencing domestic violence, and these people are being told you have to be locked in your home with your abuser, and children are not going to school, so they're in that situation as well, which is really unsafe. So this particular employer actually needs to keep the doors open, and they need staff to be there so that there's somewhere else for these people to go to seek the guidance that they need. So in relation to that one, they actually had a staff member who turned up to work who was bragging about having been at a barbecue and at a party over the weekend, which was in breach of the social distancing requirements. We had other employees then go to the CEO and say, I don't feel safe now working with that person. She's not adhering to the rules. And so it was about what kind of reasonable lawful directions can we make to make sure that we're getting our staff actually complying, whilst ensuring that everyone feels safe, because first and foremost as an employer, and really in line with employee engagement, is making sure that our people feel safe. And that's our number one paramount obligation as an employer, to make sure that we're providing that duty of care.
It's fascinating. I think that examples like that, and so many issues that everybody is facing currently are unprecedented, and we just don't know how to deal with them. I think, Andrew, a lot of the work that you do in terms of help preparing people, not just organisations, is going to be really valuable here. What I might do is, the time's flying already, and there's just so many fascinating tangents on which we could take this. But Martine, I think we've got some questions. I've had to scroll through a few of them, but I'd love to throw it open to the participants here, our audience, and stay engaged with you, because obviously you are our audience, and we're here to support you and help you. Martina, are there some questions that we want to throw to the panel and go from there?
Absolutely. Let's go with the one from Jenny first up. So this one is really directed to you, Kate, and has Circle In seen a change in the gender dynamic of parenting sharing the primary care role?
It's really interesting. I think over the last probably, even since we started Circle In, one of the big challenges that we've had is that women are picking up the majority of the, domestic duties at home. And so there's been progressively over the last few years a lot of changes around policies, particularly from progressive companies such as Medibank, who are, have rolled out gender neutral parental leave policies. So you have seen in companies like that a dramatic change in terms of the number of dads who are participating in paid parental leave. So in the vicinity of, say, basically 3% of dads taking parental leave up to sort of over 35%. So, in a really relatively short period of time. So you are seeing things starting to change. The bottom line is, though, that, there's still, women do still, pick up the majority of the domestic duties at home. While you do see more dads participating in paid parental leave, and it's becoming much more of a mainstream conversation. We always like to say it's about, changing the conversation from working mothers to working parents. The reality is that, women do pick up still the majority of the child caring responsibilities and domestic duties. But I think that is starting to change. It's really interesting, though, in the current context, there's a really different type of working environment now where, you're most likely going to have both parents at home, surrounded with the kids, trying to do homeschooling, trying to get work done, and still try and, be productive. So I think there's going to need to be a lot more flexibility on the home front to accommodate, what's changed literally in the last couple of weeks. So what we're seeing a lot of working parents do to deal with this situation is they're more running, a bit like what Catherine said, they've got the morning and the afternoon shift. So, they're both at home with the kids trying to, juggle the demands of work, but also, look after their kids and also do homeschooling as well. So it will be really interesting. I mean, 2 weeks isn't a very long time, but it will be really interesting to see whether this point in time, this moment in time will actually drive a better outcome and more equal shift in or sharing of domestic duties and childcaring responsibilities, given that both parents will likely be home at the same time. So I think a bit too early to tell. I do know that a lot of parents are really struggling with it on a day-to-day basis now as we sort of adjust. But yeah, it will be really interesting as time goes on to see whether it does really genuinely change the dynamic in workplaces and at home.
And can I extend on that question, Kate? We have another one that's come in about how can people be considerate of working parents at home? People without kids, what should we be thinking about? How do we manage trust, transparency, avoid micromanagement? Not everybody's got kids at home, so we need to be conscious of that too.
Yeah, one of the key things I think that we sort of haven't been prepared for is how do we support managers through this period? So as you'll notice on LinkedIn and, everyone's sort of talking about, well, how do you set up your desk at home and how do you manage yourself at home? But, how do we better support managers through this time as well to make sure that they do have empathy for working parents and the added demands that they are currently experiencing at the moment. So I think, it's really important for people leaders to basically have a lot more empathy with parents. It's really important that people feel connected, even though it's kind of ironic, we've got social distancing, but it actually should be called physical distancing because we actually still need the social connections. So it's really looking for ways that we can, increase the same social connection points such as, Zoom, Trello, Slack, all of those sort of tools to better help us stay connected. But equally, we've got to help people feel, and feel engaged in their workplace. How do we reach out to, the people in our team more regularly and make sure that they're okay? The other bigger, longer-term impact I think we've got to really consider is the mental health of people. Being sort of feeling isolated or disconnected from their workplace. We know even, going on parental leave, and I've experienced this myself, that feeling of, isolation, being at home for a long period of time, lacking that sort of social interaction, it can really affect how you feel about yourself. So the longer term mental health issues, I think, are really, really important to consider. So, managers of people, we really need to be thinking and asking these questions, giving people a safe space so that they can actually raise issues, and just be considerate of what people are going through, and what they're juggling. I think overall we just need a lot more, there's a big leap that businesses need to make as well, around making sure they're trusting their people, that they're going to be, it's not actually about numbers of hours and working 9 to 5. It's actually about output, and how people are feeling, and supporting them.
Thanks. And an extension again of what you're saying, Kate, about keeping that connection, and maybe I'll open it up to everybody on the panel here. Maybe we can all share a tip or suggestion on how we keep that similar level of connection with colleagues and peers in the digital world. If you put something in the chat as well, people might want to put their tips of what they're doing with the teams in the chat, but maybe we'll ask the people on the panel what they're doing with their teams.
Did you want me to kick off? I can very quickly say that, we're lucky that we have a team. We have a lot of people that work flexibly anyway, so we're really, really set up for working flexibly. So we've been able to embrace it pretty quickly. But what we do is we have, we use Zoom. So we're already using Zoom, but we have like a 15-minute check-in every day with our team. So that's really, really helpful. And then people that manage their team, they also check in at the end of the day just to see how people are going. We've set up Slack channels. It's a great way of creating that team environment, and having a bit of fun with it as well. We're starting to look at, can we have virtual coffee catch-ups with our team as well, and just sort of keeping the banter going on. Like we've been changing the background on your Zoom calls. You can actually change it so it can look like you're in, I don't know, some exotic place like the beach or something. So anyway, doing some fun things like that just to kind of keep the connection points open and make sure we're talking with each other and still have that sense of working together as a team.
Yeah, look, at the Agile 11, we have some channels on Slack that, we use quite a lot. We have a daily stand-up and a daily wrap-up that we share what's going on in our days, both in the morning and at night. We have a thanks channel that we are trying to use a lot, and Joe was very kind to kick us off, for us to share what we are grateful for in these times of change. We've been posting exercise videos to each other, doing push-ups and challenges and keeping things very social, and having lots of emojis and a lot of fun and a lot of banter on Slack, but of course a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of video calls where you're interacting with people so that you don't really miss that human connection, but you can still have connection through Zoom. And you can use, it doesn't have to be Zoom, it can be Teams, it can be Skype, it can be Hangouts. So just ensuring that you're still maintaining that face-to-face, even if it's virtual.
For us, we do a lot of the similar things that have been described, the virtual coffees and the check-ins and using Slack. But what we've also found is that most of us are quite used to working in front of screen, but actually it's quite interesting when you're doing large group Zoom calls. A lot of our team are finding it more tiring. There's more to look at. A lot more mental labor goes into trying to monitor everyone's faces in a virtual world than in a physical environment. So that's quite interesting. So we as a team have been supporting each other with encouraging to go for a walk, obviously on their own. But to zoom in while they're doing that and have a conversation with other people as well. And people have been doing different walks in different locations, but being connected online at the same time, which is quite nice. But making sure that physical activity helps with the mental labor that's going on, the additional mental labor that's going on with everything and the new tools and the new speed and pace. So the succession of Zoom calls, one after the other, with clients and with teams and with different teams, that is quite a physical and mental strain as well. So that's certainly something we've been doing as a team.
From
Hey.
our so at 11 o'clock, we all stop and we do the age quiz, which we love doing, and the team gets quite competitive. So we obviously work together and pull answers, and we always try and get, and to be honest, like I can never answer them, and I wish they would just do like a Who's Weekly kind of quiz, because I'd probably get those ones more, but it does teach me a lot. And then after we do the quiz, we also do gratitude. So that just means we do a whip around and we thank people that have been assisting us, or we just talk about things that we're actually really grateful for. And we've been doing this for years, so it's obviously really relevant in today's environment. The other thing that we did today was a virtual farewell for someone, and I actually found that quite difficult, but we also do a check-in in the morning. Just to, when we start, we just say hi and check in with each other and make sure that everyone's feeling okay.
For us, it's actually a bit ironic. I think our communication as a team is probably better than it has been previous to this remote working situation. I think the main difference is all of our conversations now start with, are you okay? Instead of what's going on, you know, what's happening in your daily role. So it's less about outcome and output. It's more about you as a person. And I think Zoom is a great connector. We've been using Zoom daily, and if it's not Zoom, then a phone call. But using Slack, we've got a channel called Lunch of the Day. And I made a post on LinkedIn about it the other day. Basically, everyone in the office takes a photo of their lunch, shares it with the group and describes it. And then the lunch that gets the most thumbs up reacts, goes into the draw to win a free meal delivery lunch the following week. And it's just been such a good little connection activity from all over the business. So products involved, and products just inherently creative people. And they've just been smashing it with all of their like 2-hour created lunches. Sometimes I'm wondering if they're actually doing work or actually just creating their lunches for the same day. But that's been something really cool to just bring people together.
An extension that we've had, it's come through in the chat, but is there anyone that has a tip on how we can build trust through Zoom or through remote working? How do we build that trust whilst we're not in the same place together? Who wants to take that?
I'll start. I think it's a really interesting one when you're working with different generations. So at Law Squared, we're a really young team. I'm probably one of the oldest there at 36. But, you know, in working with a lot of our clients where we're dealing with sort of 50, 60-year-old management for some really high-flying go-getters, it's been a matter of building that trust with a different generation by working through how they want that person to work. So really being open about communication and how can I make sure that you feel comfortable I'm doing what I'm doing? What will you measure in relation to output if it's not going to be bums on seats? And that particularly comes back to, you know, Kate's work in flexible work and people working from home or remotely. And I know that there's another question also that I'm sure we'll get to around, you know, hasn't 9 to 5 not been the norm for a long time? Well, you'd be surprised there's a lot of businesses that are in a bit of a flap right now because they are actually having to adapt to what bigger companies are probably much better at doing, which is appreciating the fact that people do need to be working different hours. And just because a bum is not on a seat doesn't mean that they're not performing, doesn't mean that they can't provide an output. So I think in relation to trust, it's about making sure that you know what it is that you're going to be measured on and how you're going to be communicating with someone during the day, and just appreciating that it might be a different method of communication than what you think is required. And that's something that, you know, I always have to check myself on as well when you start engaging with a new client or a new person, just thinking, okay, and saying to them, this is how I generally operate, or I'm better at being caught on this text or phone or whatever it is, and just being really upfront so that you can start working out from there and what they expect and tailoring your methods of work if that is required to build that trust.
I just want to build on the 9 to 5 very quickly because I saw that question as well, and I just want to, I guess, bust that myth that everyone is thinking about the employee experience as the progressive, who cares where you are, remote working is normal, you know, everyone works from anywhere, flexibility. You know, we talk a lot about that on LinkedIn, and there are plenty of gurus to talk about that. But in reality, when you walk into organizations, they're still expecting you to clock in and out. And the experience from an employee perspective, still very much of command and control. So this is what we are finding, especially in the most traditional organizations. They're still operating like we used to operate in the 1800s and, you know, in the 19th century still, with the same structures and the same system of work that we call. So the same org chart, the same policies, and, you know, punishing people and creating one more policy on top of a policy on top of a policy. And that trust element really is gone. So giving no freedom to people and no autonomy to people. So we've been sharing a lot about that leading virtually really doesn't really change. It's the same way. It's like the way you lead your team virtually and face to face is really the same. So trusting and letting go and assuming that people will know what to do and how to do it and letting them decide, that's probably the best policy for leadership teams for sure.
I think to toe into the end of that, Bia, I'm personally 27. I've been in the workforce for 4 years now, and fundamentally for me, what's really changed is just the luxury of daily interaction with both our friends and peers. I think every single workplace I've had, every single day that I've gone into work, it's been seeing people, interacting with others, having that social inclusivity. And what I've realized over the last, days or weeks is that it's bloody lonely here. I'm just so used to spending 40 hours a week with the people that I'm building a business with, and to not have that anymore really does affect my employee experience personally, and I'm sure it affects the employee experience of my team as well. So I think that question is probably angled towards the initial answer that I gave. So I just wanted to add a bit of context to that.
I just wanted to quickly call out as well that there's a lot of awesome tips and tricks coming through on the chat now. So be sure to check that out because it's a bit of a gold mine.
And I think we just have one more question in there at the moment. Mikey, we'll call that one out and then come back to you. This one's from Massimo. So how do people who are looking for work or people who lost their jobs navigate through the uncertainty of potential months of unemployment and keep connected to the world? Tough question.
I recently had a fantastic example of a woman who was actually very, very senior strategic, a director of strategy. She couldn't get a job for a few months, and now obviously the current climate has hit. And she put a post on LinkedIn and a short one-pager document about what she could contribute to an organisation in this time. So it wasn't about everything that she's achieved and how great she is. It was specifically what she could contribute to her team in crisis. And because she kept it so brief and she connected so well on LinkedIn with her connections, it was something that I was then really easily able to share with other organisations, and she's now got a number of interviews. And I think the other really amazing tip is to look at the industries that are going to be hiring. So we're going to be seeing a lot of hiring in health, social security. I've just been thinking in my head about all the different industries so that we can keep in mind when we've got family and friends, which industries they can pivot to or be looking at and targeting, and really thinking about, again, what value can they bring and how can they contribute.
Building on that, Catherine, I think that's a really good point. And one of the sort of mantras that we always say is fall in love with the problem, not the solution, which actually means understand what the real job to be done is and what you are really going to add in terms of value. So falling in love with the solution will be, okay, I'm demonstrating all of my skills and I'm listing all of my previous experience, but actually what you've outlined, what I can do for you, because I understand you and I understand what you're looking for, and I've thought about the solution and worked backwards by understanding the problem and then delivering the best solution to that. So that's really key for moving forward. And that's exactly why, as you said, that post was able to be so easily shared, is because you start seeing where it's applied, you see the real job to be done, and you can pass it on. So that is the crucial bit for that.
Just want to add one other thing, because it's quite interesting, this whole, how everyone's moving to remote working and that feeling of isolation and I don't know what to do next, or even, not feeling very valued. That's often what you feel like when you go on parental leave and you're out of the workplace for quite a number of months. So it's really interesting, the same sort of feelings of working remotely and also maybe not even having like a job. Often, when you're at home with small children, it can feel it's a very different skill set, you could say. And a lot of women in particular, when they're going, they might step out of the workplace for a little while, they often question their skills or their abilities, and they become, they lose their confidence. So I think the really important thing to do is not just think about, you know, you've got to do a job like you have done previously. It's like, what are the skills that you have, and think about how they could be applied to different industries or different environments. So it's really about, you know, doing a bit of a check on what your skills are, and then how you could, a lot of the skills you might have are quite transferable in other areas. So understanding where the opportunities are that you can also, you know, add value or be a great, you know, a great place to work. Yeah, there's some industries that are really struggling to find people at the moment as well. So, and if you can't find anything, I think the other thing is to try and keep doing things that, you know, build your skills, build your confidence, you know, help other people during this really difficult time as well. Yeah, try not to sort of just sit at home and, you know, and you know, reflect on all the things that aren't going well. Try and look at, you know, what are the opportunities out there as well.
And look, coming from a recruitment background in the past, and I'm sure Hugo will have plenty of tips around that as well, and he can share, but staying connected and having virtual Zoom calls with your contacts, with your friends as well. So go on LinkedIn and have a look at all your contacts, perhaps have virtual coffee catch-ups with them, and bring a cup of coffee or a cup of tea to your virtual catch-up, and really staying connected with people, regardless if you can't do face-to-face, because organizations are now adapting their recruitment processes as well to, you know, some organizations are still hiring, especially those organizations in the, you know, in the health, in the online service, like Catherine mentioned. So there are still jobs going around, and they will adapt to do everything virtually for sure.
Yeah, totally. I think what's been really nice to see through this period of uncertainty is the connectivity and the sense of community that's risen up. So we offer our platform in the customer service space or contact center. And what we've found is that a lot of companies are working together to transition redundant workers into different roles within other companies. And that's truly a sign of how far things have come with the digital age and I guess the era of connectivity. And for us, being a super mission-driven company, like our mission is to create a fearless and empowered future of work where people can work to live as opposed to live to work. I think the thing that our sales team have altered our approach is that we're no longer approaching companies to sell workers to them. We're now approaching companies to actually help transition their redundant workers into our communities so that they can find meaningful work elsewhere. So I think as a redundant worker, it's important to know that, you know, and if there are any in the attendee panel, it's important to know that you're not alone, and there are plenty of opportunities out there and plenty of good people who are willing to help. So probably also be vulnerable. LinkedIn's a great connected platform where you can really express yourself and let people know what you're going through. And we've seen so many posts over the last couple of weeks gain serious traction and really connect some people or some problems with people that can solve them. So I would encourage anyone who is going through this period of uncertainty, don't feel alone. Reach out to people that may be able to help, and just put yourself out there and have a bit of vulnerability and just trust in the world.
Great, great responses, great chat. Thank you. Thank you for the questions, and it's great to see that all of our participants are still with us. And please keep those questions coming through. We'll answer them over the next half an hour. Something I'd like to follow on from that you just mentioned, Hugo, and I'll put this to the panel. I think it's really fascinating. We're going through an experience where so much of what we talk about, so much of what we write about, so much of what we consult to companies about now is very much the urgent reality for everyone. And something that's, I think, really interesting, Hugo, is that the purpose and the vision and the values of a company are coming to the fore, and they're becoming really important for companies to either stick to or to contradict, perhaps even or move away from. And for employees who are looking for work, I imagine that there's going to be a lot of people who are really looking to companies who have a strong purpose and values, and who work aligned to that purpose and those values. And that match is going to be more important than ever before, because at this time, a company will be shown up as to how committed they are to their purpose and how committed they are to actually living their values when push comes to shove. And of course, there are economic factors that are going to determine whether people can remain employed or not. But it's just a really interesting time to be talking about purpose and values, because now this is when they're lived or they're not. So I'm just going to throw this open to the panel to discuss your experience of this at this time.
I think just to weigh in really quickly, I've probably got one very quick thought on this. I think there's definitely, in times like this, a lot of opportunity for economic gain. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of companies out there looking at this situation and looking how they can line their pockets about it. But I think there's a difference between that mentality and there's a difference between looking at it that way, and there's a difference between looking at it and providing value. Like Mikey said, living within your principles and values, knowing what you live every day to serve and to provide to people, the market, whoever, and really delivering on that in the most intentful way.
I'd love to hear if anybody's got experience of companies, individuals, employees, leaders who are really coming to the fore at this time, and whose values and whose purpose is really holding them in good stead and providing them with the kind of foundation that a lot of other companies don't have. Are there any examples of leaders who you can share, who are really leading the way?
I had a really fantastic one recently. Sarah Davies, who's the CEO of Philanthropy Australia, did a fantastic article to philanthropists in Australia about how now is the time for them to go hard and dig deep. And this is a really interesting perspective, because we've just had the bushfire crisis where they gave a lot of money, and Australians, both in the public sector but also the philanthropy sector, gave a lot of money to support the bushfires. And so her take, I thought, was very interesting. It was really encouraging leaders in that philanthropy circle to give, and now is that time to give. And the other thing that Sarah has done amazingly is advocacy work. So on behalf of the not-for-profit sector, worked really hard with other peak bodies, put aside any kind of notion of competition, and just said, we need to work together to #save our sector. And they've gone to government, and that is why in that latest parcel there was some really great funding given to not-for-profit. So to me, that's a wonderful example of someone who's representing an interest and putting aside any notion of competition and saying, we really need help. And she actually gave 10 tips, 10 things on what you can do to help. And they were really practical, fantastic ways. So I thought that was a really good example. And I know there was another one that Trent Milvain put into the chats around the Carlton Football Club, saying we've had to stand down some people, so we're putting it out there that we've got really great people. Here are the people. Where else can you help deploy these people? And I think that's a fantastic example of leadership in these times as well.
Yeah, I've seen as well an email circulating from the CEO of Basecamp, Jason Fried, and really fantastic. I think if you just Google, you're going to find the email, and the Corporate Rebels they put out the other day on their page as a really good example of a leader trusting their people. So essentially saying, we're going, through these challenging times, we're going to work remotely. I trust you're going to get the work done, however you're going to do it. And then they also give an example of a really bad organization. Of course, they don't share the name of an email or of a leader micromanaging and saying, this is what you need to do. This is the time you need to be online. This is the time you need to do this. You need to reply within X seconds. And, and that was a really beautiful example from Basecamp to really live their values, because they wrote books about it and they talk about how progressive they are. But in moments of crisis, that's when we see leadership and the true values of the organization coming to life. I have to also say, even though it sounds really bad, but Eduardo, our founder, has been really fantastic and optimistic and super empathetic. And I'm glad that I'm speaking here, not him. So, but it's a good shout out for him, to say that, we've been managing this and communicating to the organization and the team that everything, we're going to go through this together, and it's really challenging times, and we're going to be proactive with this, and we are on this together, and we are ramping up the emojis, we are ramping up the hearts, and and we're ramping up the love within the channel. So I think it's been really, really lovely to see.
Thank you for those. Thank you for those examples, Catherine and Bea. It's really is a time, and I think the more we can share examples of people who are walking the talk at a time like this, the more assurance or reassurance there is for others who are just nervous, perhaps, or anxious about how they might navigate this situation. And I think the best way we need people to look to lead the way, and examples being set. So thank you for sharing those. Catherine, you mentioned some advocacy work that's being done. I think there's a lot of people who are being left behind, or who are not being acknowledged as demographics. At this time, there's a question in the question Q&A box from Sean Rogers saying, do you have any views on teams still heading to their place of work, and what you prioritise for a safe experience? Kate, I'd also encourage you to sort of chime in on this one as well, about who are we forgetting? Who do leaders need to be aware of? And it's not just the people in their team, but is it parents? Is it single people who live alone? Obviously, there's a lot of people who have really diverse living arrangements and family situations. How do we care for those people?
Yeah, I think, if the research tells us anything, and our experience in relation to mental health tells us anything, it's that we actually cannot assume to know. So, there's been some fantastic work in mental health and domestic violence to pinpoint where the risk is, but we know that it's not based on, where someone is on the pecking order. It can be in affluent suburbs as well as in lower socioeconomic suburbs. So I think as a good leader, we really need to be making sure that we know our people, and that we're checking in with them, and that we're trying to build up that confidence and trust in them so that they can disclose issues with us. In relation to the question about health and workers that are still having to go into work, as I said before, your work health and safety obligation, that duty of care to workers, is paramount. There's no obligation that sits higher than that obligation. And whilst the COVID-19 is unprecedented in the sense of saying, the effects of it are unprecedented, for many, many years, we as a community have had to think about the work health and safety of our workers. So it is something that our leadership in Australia particularly are actually really ahead of the game when it comes to making sure our workers are safe. And it comes down to a risk assessment and putting into place measures to either get rid of the risk if that's possible, or to minimise the risk where we can. So we know, for example, in schools at the moment, when you do a risk assessment, you know that older workers are going to be at higher risk, and we need to be able to identify those workers so that they're then withdrawn from the workforce, or being able to be reallocated to work from home. But we saw this in the bushfire sector when the bushfire crisis happened as well. In the construction sector, we also had to look at workers that actually needed to be put on light duties or taken off the construction sites because of the hazards that were involved there. So I think we need to make sure that we're protecting our healthcare workers, but we're doing it in a really sensible way. And I love that quote, hasten slowly. We need to think really carefully about the risks and do a proper risk assessment, and then make sure that our people can either work in a way that we're getting rid of the risk or minimising the risk.
Cool. And from my perspective, I think, working parents in general are getting really smashed at the moment. So, making sure that we look after them. If you're a people manager, asking how they are, how are they going to, how can they be flexible in terms of how they're getting their work done, but also having a lot of empathy with the situation that they're facing. Another one I'd just like to call out is that, a lot of parents also are caring for elderly people as well. We call it like the sandwich generation. So we have a huge amount of content on our platform that that deals with this particular issue, and it's a really, you know, people have multiple caring responsibilities, and in light of what's happened, you know, often parents are relying on grandparents to help support them, you know, with, you know, kids on their, you know, their days, so they can work and things like that. But that's sort of no longer an option with a lot of grandparents who can no longer come anywhere near families. And also, if you do have someone in your family who is elderly, or, you know, you often have these dual caring responsibilities, or it might be even kids that have got disabilities. So, you know, very complex caring arrangements that people might have. So I think from a workplace perspective, that duty of care, you know, asking people how they are, how they're coping, what other support they can have, or you know, you can offer them in this time. Just being really empathetic, keeping the communication channels open, you know, helping people feel connected and supported by their workplace, even though they are working virtually. You know, it'll go a long way for people feeling, you know, valued and supported, and help with their longer term engagement as well.
Yeah, amazing. Clearly, there are some really urgent duty of care considerations and workplace health and safety obligations for employers and leaders to consider. There's a question that's come through in the chat for Andrew, and I might go to that one now, because it's interesting to look at not only the urgent primary care needs that employers need to take into consideration, but moving beyond that, you know, through this time, how do leaders and colleagues, how do we empower people to continue being creative and innovative, not just doing the work?
Well, really, really good question, because normally people describe BAU as the reason why they are held back from innovating, and now we need to innovate more than ever. So our BAU has been disrupted. So while in this immediate short term there's a vast increase in work and just getting things working, we also need to make sure that we start thinking about what happens in the sort of coming days and weeks and months and then ongoing. There is no certainty for how long this is going to last. So we've got to be thinking about how we support our teams remotely to innovate, and how we empower them to be creative and curious. So one of the traps that people fall into is that they start saying, yep, I'm open to ideas, just share your ideas, talk to me, keep sharing ideas. And this is also filtered through our organization's culture around, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. The danger with both of those things are that if people don't have ideas and they don't talk to you, they might want to talk to you to explore the problem and need help and guidance with how to get to the solution. And the downside of just saying, I'm all ears, send me your ideas, is you get bombarded and what we call idea bombed. People just drop all the ideas on you and then expect you as a leader or as a manager to start acting on them and taking them forward. What actually needs to happen and what we need to do is support our teams to start saying, okay, how do we understand the problems that are going on? How do we identify what the real job to be done is? How do we start seeing the value that needs to be created? We might not have the solution yet, but let's understand the situation that we're in. And then by looking at that and coming up with the ideas. So there's lots of tools and techniques to understanding problems, simple ones like 5 whys, for example, to get to root causes. And that will help us start identifying what we need to work on. And then we can start moving forward into the ideas phase. There's lots of tools. So I've seen some of our teams getting very creative with tools available to them. So things like the Google tools, so Google Slides or Google Docs, and the Google Numbers, that allows people to type real time and for each other to see it. So we could do something like a problem storming technique of gathering what we see as the immediate challenges or problems, or moving further into the future. And then we can move into an ideation technique. One of the ones that we use a lot in our team is a simple tool called Crazy Eights, which is just 8 ideas in 8 minutes around a specific challenge or problem. And again, this is made actually more fun and more engaging by being remote if you use a sharing platform or a collaboration tool, as I said, like the Google systems, or something like Miro, for example, where we can put ideas in and we can gather them, and then we can start assigning those to the real root causes and the challenges. So one of the key things, as I said earlier, is to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And that means understanding the problem so that we can deliver the best solutions. So in this time where we're all now stretched and more remote, we need to focus on being effective, not just efficient. We did efficiency. We've been doing that for a long time. Now we need to focus on how we can be effective. So understanding that as leaders, we don't need to be leading the innovation, but we need to offer some guidance and some safe space for people to discuss the problems. They might not have the answers yet, but they want to share and discuss the problems and their insights. And then we can move people into that idea phase, which actually drives enthusiasm. It releases great happy chemicals. So dopamine is released by coming up with ideas. So it actually makes people feel happier and engaged and positive. And then once we've got those ideas, we've got to remember that they might not all be great. Some of them might need some work. So one of the top tips that we give people at this time is don't be the but, be the and. So it's very easy to say, yeah, but I can think of all the reasons why that won't work. And what that does is that actually diminishes people's desire to start bringing things forward. Use the yes and technique. Yes, I hear you. And we could improve it by adding this, or and we could adapt it in this way. So we've got to be very mindful that while we're working remotely, we have to be more empathetic and more conscious about our words and our language and our tone and our approach. And innovation, creativity, this is a gift that people give. It's typically not a job role that's clearly defined how you innovate and this is how we do it. People make these connections, and we have to enable those to happen. And certainly now we need to do that at greater speed and with greater effectiveness, not just efficiency.
We've
Wonderful.
got a question in there that's an extension of that. Sorry, Mikey. That research has shown that parts of our brain that help us think creatively get shut down when we're in fear and panic. So how can we help teams stay in the right state of mind?
That is a really good extension question. So our sort of panic processing, our danger receptors obviously drive us into fight or flight mode. And then our judgment zones, the frontal lobes, start taking over, and our critical judgment kicks in. So one of the great ways of overcoming that is understanding the power of storytelling. So building in empathy about your users. So who are you innovating for? What do they need? What are they going through at the moment or in normal times? Whatever they're going to be in the future. What do they think and feel? What is their story, their journey? So we remove ourselves from our current situation of panic and put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we want to innovate for, the people that we want to add new products or add new services or deliver new value to. And so using the power of storytelling. So another technique is to create personas of these people. Who are they? What's their background? What are they interested in? What do they fear? What are their likes and dislikes around the challenge that we're trying to solve or create? And by walking in their shoes and getting some understanding, we start calming our amygdala system down, and we start using the limbic system. We're getting very technical now. You didn't know you were going to have a biology lesson. We start using the limbic system, which is the imagination zones of our brains, and we start picturing these people in their situation, their environment. We start imagining their journey that they're going through. And then what we can do is we can start seeing these insights that's going on, and we can start teasing those out, and that's what we start addressing. So one of the ways to calm ourselves and think clearly is to say, okay, who are we trying to serve for? So at the moment, obviously, a lot of businesses are under threat. So they're immediately looking for how can we save cash? How can we make cash? How can we prolong the runway? How can we get more customers? How can we get more members? Whatever it might be. That is actually thinking all about yourselves. And that is jumping straight to falling in love with the solution, because that's where you want to find the solution. But what we need to do is actually look at the real job to be done. What is the value that is needed or required by our end users? What is it that they want and need at this moment in time? How can we help and assist them? And that's where these new opportunities come from. And that's different parts of the brain being sparked by putting yourselves in other people's shoes and the power of storytelling.
Can I just add to that, because I'm putting my health coach hat on, because I'm also a health coach, but breathing really helps with the flight mode as well. So if you see yourselves in this situation, just start breathing from your belly a few times, and hopefully you'll bring yourself back.
And never forget the power of the compliment sandwich. Does everyone know that? Particularly when you're giving feedback, and when people are in a panic mode because they think you're giving them critical feedback, start with the compliment. Middle is talking about the constructive feedback, and end with how valuable they are. People always remember the last bit of information more than anything else. If you need to rezone the constructive feedback, definitely have it in writing, but really reassure people about the value at the end.
I think another way of putting that is 2 stars and a wish. So these are the great things that I love, and this is what I wish we could develop together. And I think that's the key. We've got to remove judgment. We've got to say and go into this zone where actually we're all working on this together. So this is what I wish we can do. And we can even use techniques where you take that stage further and you say, how might we? And then it's develop, build, foster, encourage, whatever the needs to be. And these techniques are actually really powerful.
Such wonderful experience, and it's translating beautifully to this current context. Andrew, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Something that came up for me when you were talking about the understanding the challenge and providing a solution for that. And I've noticed a couple of comments in the chat that relate to this as well. Is when there is quite a specific challenge, it forces us to be innovative and creative when it comes to solutions. It also provides challenges around communication, and I wanted to throw this to the panel. For the tools such as Zoom and chat in Zoom and Q&A in Zoom and shared docs where people can, post virtual post-it notes, etc., are all effective ways at communicating, but they don't replace so many of the subtle in-person cues that are essential for communicating. And communicating, not just, it feels like this is a very omni-channel way of communicating. We're all looking into a screen and everything's sort of focused, but we're missing out on the awareness of other cues that are so visceral and important in terms of understanding ourselves and understanding others in their communication. I feel like this is a real challenge for us, and I'd love to hear about your experience, how we can balance our needs for communication that are not just through a computer screen. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm happy to throw it to the panel for your thoughts on this.
Well, I can add something to that quite quickly. So there's been a lot of research done and underway currently around, and this is also being done in Australia, which is really great, around something called brain synchronicity. So when humans actually physically meet, you're picking up all those nuances and those subtleties. And we've probably all had those moments where you meet a friend or someone else, and you're chatting away, you're really engaged, and then it's almost like they're reading your mind and they're saying the same thing. that's a form of brain synchronicity where we're actually connected and we're taking in all the subtleties of your body language and the pheromones and all the other things that our bodies are communicating and giving off. Now, it's been proven that we don't get that through a 2D screen. And that is also why we're getting reports from our teams where people are saying, actually, I'm really tired. I'm getting more tired by working through Zoom and trying to watch everyone. And that's because our brain's doing this additional processing work where they're actually looking for all those cues and trying to pick up on it, and we're not getting them. Now, in the immediate short term, there is not a lot we can do about this. Maybe we'll adapt, maybe we'll evolve. But one of the things that we've been working with our team and our clients is saying, don't forget the other human visceral things. So like jotting down physical notes, writing things in a notepad with a pen, writing post-it notes with Sharpies, drawing ideas out, not just typing them. What this also does is a number of things. One, it actually helps with, again, mental wellness and health. It activates different parts of our brains and stimulates different endorphins. But it also helps with different forms of creativity and problem solving and calming things down, as we were just talking about, not sticking with one medium. So yeah, we obviously can't go out and meet and hug and shake hands with friends and colleagues. So we have to find other ways of creating these connections. So, actually drawing images and sending them to each other is one form, but particularly in the creativity process, it is really key to not just rely on digital.
Can I just jump in and ask, I'm learning so much from everyone, so thank you for all the feedback and information. Andrew, we've got a number of IT clients and they love using Slack as a channel, but it's very dangerous for tricky performance management discussions, yet they prefer it because they do find it difficult having face-to-face or telephone conversations. What kind of tips could you provide in relation to that problem?
Okay, I'm not sure I'm the expert on delivering performance management via Slack, but one of the things that we have found by working with clients and seeing this in terms of the innovation work that we've been doing is that it comes down or it comes back to this trust thing where I am probably unsure how it's going to go. If I can write it down and then I've done it, it's out there. I can't trust how they're going to react or respond. I can't trust how I might react and respond. And one of the things that we've found working with clients is trust doesn't, you can't build trust to get vulnerability. You use vulnerability to build trust. So actually having those conversations of saying, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm imagining is happening. This is what I'm feeling as a result of what's going on. How do you feel? And that's the vulnerability piece of saying, yeah, I haven't got the answers, but there's something that's not sitting right here. Let's explore it. And that's that vulnerability piece. And what we've certainly discovered in our team and with the clients that we're working with is when we go to that human level of vulnerability first, you actually build trust far quicker. And then actually it is easier to pick up the phone or have those face-to-face calls when it comes to performance. Normally what happens with performance is that we get frustrated and angry in the background, sit on it, hoping that it's going to get better, try and point them in the right direction using subtle cues and some suggestions. They're not taking it. Why are they not taking it? And then it gets to a point where it's, I'm so angry. I need to now deal with this. Whereas actually having some earlier vulnerable conversations of saying, this is how it's making me feel. This is what's happening as a result. How do you feel? Combine that with empathy and always go, well, there's two sides to every aspect. So put yourself in their shoes. And when we use design thinking with our clients, a big piece of that is about empathy and putting yourself in the other person's shoes. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What's going on in their world? There could be all sorts of, hardships or terrible things that are making them behave in this way that we've got no idea about. So yeah, simply writing a message, well, I've got it off my to-do list, it's done, it's out there. But then how is that going to make them feel? So I think there's a big piece around empathy, around vulnerability to deliver trust, not expecting trust to be built straight off and everything else will flow from it. I think it's the other way around.
Yeah, and I feel like it's fascinating that we're having to be a lot more intentional with how we go about doing this now, because we just don't have the opportunity to draw upon all the other cues that we have as human beings in terms of communicating when it comes to those difficult conversations such as performance management, redundancy conversations, etc. So fascinating conversation. I reckon we could go for another hour and a half. We've got 5 minutes left. And there's been a great question that's come through, and I think it's a really good one for us to finish on. So with 5 minutes left and 5 of us on the panel, let's see if we can wrap this up on time so everybody can get back to their other lives. And again, just want to say a big thank you to all of the participants who have stayed on and not just stayed on, but have provided such wonderful reflections and feedback to us on chat. There's so many conversation threads I'd love to follow up there, and I hope that we get a chance to do that beyond this event. But the question is, and it's really interesting, I just wonder how things are going to change when we do return. Things won't be returning back to normal. It'll be different. But by way of wrapping up this conversation, I'll put it to each of you. How do you think the employee experience will change again post-COVID-19 when we go back to the office? Will we go back to the office as we knew it? We'll start with you, Catherine, and then we'll go Andrew, Kate, Hugo, and we'll finish with Bia.
Oh, that's so mean, because now I don't get to hear the wisdom of everyone else. But look, I'm normally an optimist, but I am concerned because for people that do promote working flexibly like myself, now is our time to shine. But in actual fact, this is not normal reality. And there are going to be a lot of people that get burnt through this experience because they've got children at home with them. They've got a whole lot of other stresses, financial and otherwise, that's on them. Add in bloody homeschooling. Like, how are we supposed to manage all of that? So I'm concerned that people might be burnt through flexible work. And I'm also concerned that employers will struggle with the productivity element. And I just think we really need to think about the fact that this is not the norm and we can do it a lot better in more calmer circumstances. But having said that, I'm very optimistic about the people getting better and using technology better. Even our team ourselves have used Zoom a lot more than what we would have normally, and learning a lot of tips. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to bring a lot of those elements back into the workplace. I am a little bit concerned we're going to miss out on the kissing and hugging of clients. I'm going to miss that, but I don't think that's going to come back.
Well, I'm still an optimist, so I do believe kissing and hugging will come back in the right time and where appropriate. So just to be clear there, but I'm also an optimist around how we're working. So we have spoken for so long about how remote and technology enables us to do this. We are in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution. The cyber physical revolution officially started in 2011, and here we are at 2020, and a lot of us are still scrambling to understand how we can do it. Mainly because of as these other additional burdens that Catherine, you've just outlined. But I'm actually quite enthused about the future as a result of this. I mean, obviously, when we get past the horrendous short-term impact. because a lot of clients and companies that we've worked with have said that working remotely has been impossible, or that our technology won't cope with it, or our service has to be delivered face to face, or our products have to be delivered in this way. And now we're forced to do this. So innovation loves constraint. The more you constrain something, the more creative you've got to be. And actually what we're seeing with our teams that we're working with is their creativity levels have jumped to the next step up, and the outcomes that are coming out will serve them for a very long time as a result of this. And they are seeing that there are new ways of working. They are seeing that there are different things. They're seeing that they can engage with their customers and their end users differently to add value. So it's not to say that it's going to replace face-to-face. One of the things I say is it's not better or worse, it's different. And in different, there's lots of opportunities, pros and cons, it's different. And I think we're going to keep some good stuff going forward post this.
I think, the whole remote working piece has been really fast-tracked. And I think once we get out of this, horrible period where, some pretty sad things are happening, I think there will be some good outcomes for, people working remotely, particularly working parents who need that additional flexibility. So I think, we really have challenged a lot of the traditional 9-to-5 kind of working assumptions, and pretty much everyone is having to adopt this way of working in the short term. So there is going to be a bit of short-term pain. I think longer term, it will change the way we work. I also think it's going to bring about, just on a bigger level, a lot more appreciation for some of the things that we can't have at the moment, or a much more difficult appreciation for how good teachers are at teaching our kids, not having to do that ourselves. Appreciation for our health workers and the amazing work they're doing. It's making anyone who's in science, technology, health, they're all superstars at the moment and don't often get a lot of credit for a lot of the work they do. So I think there's, and also another level, our CO2 emissions are, incredibly low. So it's also challenging a lot of those, do we need to travel everywhere on planes? And, and it's also bringing people back into their local community and spending a lot more time with their families. So I think there's going to be some bigger macro sort of changes and a greater appreciation for life in general and some of the freedoms that we've had. And also some of amazing people around us who do amazing things in their jobs every day, to help us, live a safe and happy life. So hopefully once we get through this horrible period and things return a bit more to normal, it might be a defining moment in our history, hopefully.
Yeah, firstly, Kate, you raise a really good point. If anyone's seen the photos of the environment and how positive this lack of footprint has been on the environment, it's really quite something. But I think overall, humans are highly adaptive beings. We evolve, we change with our circumstances, and looking through the lens of sort of cause and effect, the cause is unfortunate and it's really drastic, but the effect, I think, has the potential to be really exciting, and I think it could fundamentally shift the way that the world works. I think we're becoming a lot more connected. I also think that what excites me is giving people in non-physical proximity locations, so i.e. people in regional areas, people that maybe have disabilities, giving them access to more meaningful work and removing those traditional barriers that do block these people out from finding jobs with different employers. Like, think about people in country areas. All they can do is work on the farm or work in the grocery store, but all of a sudden there's these opportunities that may arise if this way of working is truly adapted into society. And I think it could be the next wave of the way we work disruption, which we saw with Uber. But I think that's obviously going to be developed with time, and it's going to be interesting to watch it unfold.
I echo everyone's thoughts, but I was making some notes here while everyone was talking and kind of reflecting on what you've been saying. And, I think I am an optimist, but I also acknowledge and agree with Catherine that we are speaking from a position of privilege. We are in this safe bubble with safe and healthy families right now, and in a position that we still have jobs. and money in the bank. So I just want to acknowledge that, even though I'm always an optimist and I always try to see the silver lining of everything, I think there are lessons and learnings for us humans and individuals to build that connection and be kind to each other and really value that power of connection. I think teams now are going to get closer, more than ever. I think building that connection as teams now is really important, building more values and really understanding how we're going to self-regulate and how we're going to work together. Organizations and leadership, there's a huge lesson there. So I think, Catherine, you mentioned before, and I didn't say anything, but I did pick up on that one of your clients has a policy that people working from home shouldn't have their kids. Like, I just want to swear here in the recording, but this for me, it's like unbelievable how this is still happening nowadays. So I think for me, there is a complete shift, a radical shift in mindset, and maybe I am radical for organizations to change the system. And I do believe that the system, the way we structure, the way we remunerate, the way we create policies and processes and all of that, is actually driving the wrong behaviors in leadership teams. So if we have the system right, if we rethink our system in organizations, we can actually, go back into normality with better ways of working, with better organizations. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the biggest lesson for all of us is that the planet is having a rest. So I think there is a beautiful silver lining for us humans, for us teams, for us organizations, for us broader community, but also the planet as a being that is having a rest. And maybe I'm being a little bit too deep here, but I think there is something for us to think and rethink and unlearn as we go back to normality.
Thank you. Thank you, Bea. I'm gonna wrap it up. I've been enjoying the comments in the chat and the reflection there. I'll reiterate what Alana has said, and just to say thank you for how you've all shown up tonight. It was a very respectful conversation, and one that takes into consideration the context in which we're working and in which you're working. I'd like to thank you each for bringing your experience, your insights to this conversation in a way and at a time that I think it's never been more relevant and important. We're talking about the employee experience, and the way in which you've contributed to this conversation, I feel has really served the audience at a time when we need it most. And I think I speak on behalf of the audience because I am an employee, and I also work with companies to help leaders navigate this. And the fact is, we're all figuring it out as we go along. But I have certainly learnt a great deal from your experience, and I thank you. I'd like to shout out Joe and Martine, who have been working behind the scenes to moderate not only the Q&A but to respond to the comments. So big thank you to you for making this works and flow so well. Thank you to our participants who have engaged with such wonderful feedback and insights, comments and reflections, which has really helped us to navigate this conversation. So Bea, please pass on our thanks and gratitude to everyone at Agile 11 for making this possible. What a wonderful conversation, and I hope that this is the first of many over the coming months.
And on behalf of the panelists, thank you, Mikey, for bringing elegance and brilliance and beautiful words to the way you moderated the panel. So thank you so much. We are very grateful for you joining us. And I just wanted to say, let's all clap, please. This is virtual, but we can still clap. And one thing that we normally say at the end of any 11 nights that we host at the Agile 11 is we ask people to turn on their LinkedIn and find connections nearby. And I can see people on the chat sharing their LinkedIn profiles. So if you would like to share your LinkedIn profiles to connect and use these opportunities and networking opportunities to connect with people virtually, please do share your LinkedIn profile there, and we can all connect and form a community and hopefully make work better for everyone too.
Just before I do wrap up, Bea, how can people stay in touch, and what's the best way for us to access this recording moving forward?
Yeah, so everyone who participated today and registered for the event will get the recording. So please check your email tomorrow. We're going to be sending this through. And then we'll share the details for all the organisations here in the panel. So if you want to reach out, you feel free to do so.
Wonderful. Thank you. Working remotely and using technology like this certainly can have its drawbacks when it comes to communication. But one of the things I've really enjoyed, which I'm not sure any of you can relate to, I'm sure you can, is that you can just leave. With a click of the button, you're gone. There's no awkward goodbyes, and there's no like, oh, I've got to go, and you having to make sure you say goodbye to everybody. It's just like end meeting, leave meeting, I'm gone. So I will say officially thank you for everyone's contribution, and look forward to staying in touch, and feel free to leave whenever you like. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Stay safe and healthy.